She feared the noise of humanity, but his music struck deeper than any weapon. Tonight, their rebellion begins.
The abandoned nightclub on Ontario 3 was a place where memories came to rot. Once decades earlier, the cavernous hall had pulsed with life, alien bass lines rattling the walls, neon advertisements promising unforgettable nights, laughter and intoxication echoing under a glittering ceiling. Now the place was reduced to a mausoleum of forgotten pleasures. The scent of stale alien liquor lingered in the air, like a ghost that refused to move on. Broken bottles littered the sticky floor. The neon signs still clung to existence, flickering sporadically, casting uneven glows of sickly pink and green that threw distorted shadows across worn-out furniture. Not exactly five-star accommodations, but when you were dodging Alliance patrols, you took what you could get. Captain Axel Kushner pressed his muscular frame against the cracked plaster wall near a boarded-up window, every nerve taut. He shifted slightly, peering through a narrow slit where the boards had warped. Outside, another patrol skimmer hummed past its twin searchlights, cutting across the twilight like knives. Ontario 3 had no true daylight. The planet lived perpetually under a dim dusk, the kind of light that made it difficult to distinguish between sunrise and sunset. The searchlights passed. Axel exhaled silently, his hand flexing against the grip of the plasma sidearm at his hip. He was used to running smuggler, occasional mercenary, full-time thorn in the Alliance's side. That was the life he had chosen, or maybe the life that had chosen him. Either way, survival had turned into his only consistent job description. Behind him, a voice spoke softly, musical lilting tinged with an accent that was almost British, but not quite. "Think they'll give up soon." The voice startled him. He hadn't forgotten she was there, but he still wasn't used to hearing her talk. Axel turned. Leaning against the bar counter with arms folded was the lavender-skinned alien woman who had introduced herself simply as Mela. Her hair, silver white, cascading in liquid waves, caught every shred of neon that survived in the room and reflected it like moonlight trapped in strands of silk. Her large turquoise eyes were fixed on him with a gaze that mixed curiosity and weariness in equal measure. Alliance patrols didn't usually warrant this much attention unless someone valuable was in the crosshairs. Axel knew he was on plenty of wanted lists, but even for him, the number of skimmers sweeping this district felt excessive. He narrowed his eyes at her. "Alliance goons," Axel snorted, brushing a hand through his tousled blonde hair. "They're like a bad hangover. Stick around way longer than anyone wants." The smuggler's grin tried to mask his unease. He hadn't expected company when he ducked into this ruined club to evade pursuit. Yet there she was, already in hiding, watching him with that mix of suspicion and amusement. She tilted her head. "Your species has a peculiar way with words, so colorful, so inefficient." Her words were flat, but her eyes glimmered as if she were testing him. Axel chuckled, the sound echoing in the hollow room. Humans like to take the scenic route with language. Makes life more interesting. She allowed her gaze to drift toward the duffel bag he'd dropped near the counter. The soft leather sagged under its own weight, a jumble of essentials and contraband barely concealed. "What contraband are you transporting?" she asked, her voice calm but piercing. "That has the Alliance so determined to apprehend you." Axel clutched his chest with mock offense. "Who says it's contraband? Could be birthday presents for my dear old mother." Mela's face didn't move, but her eyes betrayed subtle calculation. "Your facial expressions indicate deception. And yours indicate you're not just some innocent bystander," Axel shot back. "The Alliance doesn't deploy this many skimmers for a routine check." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Outside, the distant whine of engines finally began to fade, leaving only the throb of the nightclub's ancient refrigeration units long empty of anything worth cooling. Mela pushed herself from the bar and strolled slowly across the room. Her black outfit clung to her figure with a tailored precision that accentuated every graceful curve. Metallic accents glimmered faintly as she passed under the broken neon signs. Alien or not, she radiated a presence Axel couldn't ignore, equal parts soldier and mystery. We appear to be at an impasse of trust, she said, her slender fingers tracing a line across the dust-caked countertop. Perhaps a distraction would ease the tension while we wait. Axel raised an eyebrow. What kind of distraction did you have in mind? She gestured toward his duffel. I am curious about your possessions. My people value understanding other cultures. He laughed under his breath. Ah, the old show me yours game. Fine. But don't get too excited. Nothing in there is particularly exotic. He crouched, unzipped the duffel, and began pulling items out one by one: a spare jacket, a half-empty ration pack, a wrapped plasma cell. Then something metallic caught the light. Mella's eyes widened slightly as she pointed. What is this device? Her fingertip hovered over the vintage cassette player, its once polished surface dulled by years of use. A pair of bulky headphones rested coiled beside it like a sleeping relic. Axel picked it up, his expression softening with nostalgia. This old thing, music player, ancient Earth tech. My grandfather gave it to me along with his collection. Been hauling it around ever since. Mella examined it like a scientist with an alien specimen. It plays music. Yeah, heavy metal, lots of guitars, lots of drums. Probably not your style. Pretty aggressive. Might hurt those sensitive ears of yours. Something flickered across her features. Pride, defiance. Her turquoise eyes gleamed. My auditory perception is more acute than a human's. Yes, but I am not fragile. Never said you were, Axel replied, holding his palms up. Just warning you, this stuff has been known to offend delicate sensibilities. Her lips tightened in determination. I would like to experience this heavy metal. For a moment, Axel simply stared at her. Then he shrugged, fiddling with the cassette player's controls. The small power indicator blinked green. Miraculously, the battery still had charge. Your funeral, he muttered with a smirk, slotting in one of the worn cassettes. He adjusted the settings and placed the headphones carefully over her head, trying not to tangle her silver hair. At first, her eyes went wide. Her body stiffened. Her mouth parted in a silent gasp as the opening riff of Enter Sandman thundered through the ancient device. Axel reached forward, ready to yank the headphones away, fearing some catastrophic biological reaction. Then it happened. The shock melted from her face, replaced by wonder. Pure, unfiltered wonder. Her turquoise eyes closed as if she were savoring the sensation of rain after centuries of drought. Slowly, cautiously, her head began to move with the rhythm. A smile, genuine and radiant, unlike the guarded expressions she'd worn before, spread across her lips. Axel blinked, speechless. Holy shit, he whispered. Before his eyes, the uptight, enigmatic alien woman was dissolving into something freer, looser. Her body swayed with growing confidence, her pale fingers tapping lightly against the bar in time with the music. The harsh riffs, the pounding bass, the relentless drums, things that should have repelled her, were transforming her instead. Outside, the distant Alliance sirens finally faded away, swallowed by the twilight. Neither of them noticed. In that forgotten nightclub on a dying world, something extraordinary was happening. A connection, not forged by words or contracts, but by the raw universal language of music. The final notes of Enter Sandman still echoed faintly through the battered headphones when Axel's instincts screamed at him. Something in the air had changed, the subtle vibration of approaching engines, the shift of shadows across the boarded windows. He tugged the headphones off Mella's head. Her turquoise eyes opened, still glowing with wonder, only to find his expression deadly serious. Alliance, he whispered, finger pressed to his lips. The sound came clearer now, the low mechanical whine of skimmers sweeping closer, followed by the unmistakable thud of boots on pavement. Searchlights once again slashed across the gaps in the wooden boards, flooding the room with harsh beams. Mella's smile vanished, replaced by sharp alertness. Without hesitation, she moved toward the bar, pressing her palm against what looked like a solid panel. With a hiss, the section slid open, revealing a narrow service corridor beyond. Axel raised an eyebrow. Convenient. How do you know about that? I've been hiding here for 3 days, she answered, tone clipped. Now move. The nightclub's front door shuddered violently as something heavy slammed against it. Splinters of wood flew. The Alliance wasn't knocking this time, they were coming in. Ladies first, Axel quipped with a grin, far too casual for the moment. Mela rolled her eyes but slipped through the panel. Axel followed, pulling it shut behind them just as the main door exploded inward with a crash. The service corridor was narrow and suffocating, the walls sweating with condensation, the air stale. The only illumination came from a faint blue glow stick Axel snapped to life. Its glow revealed Mela's face barely inches from his own. In the confined darkness, her presence became impossible to ignore, the faint scent of something sharp and sweet, like cinnamon laced with ozone, the warmth radiating from her lavender skin. "This way," she whispered, brushing past him. Her shoulder brushed his chest as she squeezed forward, and the brief contact sent a current through him. He gritted his teeth and forced his focus back to survival. Behind them, muffled voices barked orders as Alliance officers fanned through the nightclub. The clatter of boots echoed faintly down the corridor, growing louder. "They'll use sonic scanners," Mela hissed, leading the way through a twisting section of tunnel. "These old maintenance shafts aren't stable." Almost on cue, a low rumble vibrated through the walls. Dust rained from the ceiling. Axel grabbed Mela's hand instinctively, pulling her into a run. The corridor sloped upward, the blue glow bouncing wildly as they sprinted. "Where are we even going?" he demanded between breaths. "There's a hatch ahead," she replied, her voice calm despite the chaos. "It leads to the rooftops." They reached a rusted wheel lock half buried in debris. Together they heaved against it. The metal screeched, unmoving at first. Another tremor shook the shaft louder this time. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ceiling above. "Come on, sweetheart," Axel grunted, throwing his shoulder into the wheel. "Open for Daddy." Mela shot him a bewildered glance. "You speak to machinery as though it were alive." "Only when it doesn't listen," he said through clenched teeth. She added her strength, her lithe frame belying surprising power. With a final groan, the wheel turned and the hatch popped open, flooding them with night air. They tumbled onto a rooftop, coughing as they sucked in fresh oxygen. Above them stretched a sky littered with alien constellations, stars bright and sharp against the eternal dusk. For a heartbeat, the danger seemed far away. Then the sirens rose again. "On your feet," Axel said, pushing himself up and offering his hand. She hesitated only a moment before clasping it. Their palms pressed together, warm, steady, reluctant to let go even after she was standing. For a long moment, they stood close in the starlight, breathing hard. Something unspoken passed between them. An attraction neither had expected, born not from safety, but from danger, from the adrenaline still pounding in their veins. "That music," Mela whispered, suddenly her voice softer than the wind. "I've never felt anything like it." Axel smiled, his breath still ragged. "That's called adrenaline. The good stuff always gets your heart racing." "No," she insisted, shaking her head slightly. Her silver hair shimmered. "It was more than that. My people, we're taught to control emotions, suppress anything too intense. But when I heard those sounds, it was as if something broke free inside me." Axel stepped closer, unable to resist. That's the power of heavy metal. It's raw, honest, primal. The last word hung heavy in the air. Mela's eyes flickered down to his lips, then back to his eyes. For a moment, the distance between them seemed about to vanish entirely. Then the patrol's spotlight swept across the rooftop below and reality slammed back in. "Time for philosophy later," Axel muttered, tugging her hand. "We need to move." They dashed across the rooftops, ducking behind ventilation stacks and broken billboards. Alliance skimmers crisscrossed the sky's beams, cutting dangerously close. From above, the two fugitives must have looked like shadows dancing across the bones of the city. As they paused behind a rusted antenna, Axel chanced a glance at her. "So are you going to tell me why the Alliance wants you badly enough to bring out the big toys?" Her turquoise eyes reflected the neon glow eerily. For a moment, he thought she might refuse. Then she sighed. "I'm what you would call a deserter from the Cultural Preservation Corps." Axel's eyebrows shot up. Cultural preservation. The same guys that bust my shipments of Earth music and call it contamination. Mela nodded, bitterness in her voice. "We were tasked with maintaining the purity of Lithian society by preventing outside influence. At least that is what they claimed. And now you're running from your own." "I began questioning our methods," she said quietly. "I saw what we did to those who resisted. Entire traditions erased, songs silenced, artworks destroyed. And when I spoke out," she broke off, her jaw tightening. "The Alliance does not forgive dissent." Axel gave a low whistle. So you're basically the cultural police, and now you're on the run from the real police. That's rich. A faint, rueful smile tugged at her lips. The irony is not lost on me. Another tremor rocked the rooftop as a skimmer passed low overhead, its engines rattling the broken glass. Axel grabbed her shoulder and pulled her into a crouch. You realize he whispered, his grin returning, despite the danger that makes you even more interesting. A runaway culture cop with a taste for metal. Her cheeks darkened slightly, whether from embarrassment or the alien equivalent of a blush, he couldn't tell. Careful, Captain Kushner, she said, voice cool but eyes sparkling. Curiosity can be dangerous. Danger's my middle name, he replied. Your species does not have middle names based on danger. Details. Another searchlight swept close, forcing them into silence. Then, as the skimmer veered away, Axel caught sight of a landmark in the distance, the faint outline of the maintenance bay where his ship was docked. Bay 17, he murmured. Less than a kilometer east. My ride's waiting. Then we should hurry, Mela replied. They set off again, moving swiftly across the broken rooftops. For the first time, they weren't just fugitives running from the Alliance. They were running together. Two strangers bound by circumstance, by shared danger, and by a single night of music that had already changed everything. The rooftops of Tarian 3 stretched like a graveyard of steel and broken promises. Entire districts had been left to rot when the Alliance diverted funding to their core colonies. Rusted towers leaned precariously, neon signs buzzed with half-dead electricity, and the endless dusk bathed everything in a violet haze. Axel and Mela moved quickly but carefully, crouching low whenever a patrol skimmer passed overhead. Below, the streets were crawling with officers in black armor, neural disruptors slung across their chests. The Alliance hadn't just dispatched a patrol team, they had unleashed a full tactical sweep. This is insane, Axel muttered, pausing behind a ventilation shaft. I've seen my face on plenty of wanted posters, but never enough to warrant this much heat. Because it isn't just about you anymore, Mela whispered. Her gaze was locked on the patrols, but her words carried a weight he hadn't heard before. They're after me, too. Axel raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I got that impression. You still haven't explained why. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gestured toward a shadowed alley that led down to street level. They climbed down carefully, boots clanging against rusted ladders. At the bottom, Axel pulled her into the shadows just as two armored officers marched past. Only when they were gone did she speak. You smuggle Earth artifacts, yes, music. Books. Art. Axel smirked, among other things. Let's call it independent cultural exchange. Her lips tightened. Do you know why the Alliance calls it contraband? Because they're allergic to fun. Because culture spreads faster than ideology, she said sharply. Art inspires rebellion. Music awakens emotion. Stories challenge authority. The Alliance fears these things more than weapons. Axel frowned. You're telling me they're scared of a few old guitar riffs and some dusty paperbacks? She met his eyes, turquoise, shining in the half-light. They aren't just suppressing foreign culture. They are erasing it, rewriting histories, implanting false traditions, making entire species forget who they once were. Axel stared at her, the grin fading from his face. You're serious. I was part of the Cultural Preservation Corps, she confessed, her voice tinged with bitterness. We were told we were protecting societies from contamination. In truth, we were sterilizing them, scrubbing away anything that might inspire disobedience. The revelation landed like a thunderclap. For the first time since meeting her, Axel saw not just the poised, enigmatic alien, but a fugitive burdened by guilt. He exhaled slowly. And now you're running because you couldn't stomach it anymore. Yes, she admitted softly, and because I stole something. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued, but before he could press further, the whine of engines echoed overhead. A patrol skimmer swept low, its spotlight grazing the alley wall. Axel cursed and grabbed her hand. No time for confessions. Bay 17's just ahead. They sprinted through the twisting alleys, ducking behind debris when spotlights swept near. The commercial district loomed closer, its skeletal warehouses and docking bays casting long shadows. Finally, the angular frame of maintenance Bay 17 appeared. Axel led her to a rusted door sealed with an outdated security panel. He cracked his knuckles, pulled a small toolkit from his belt, and got to work. Mela scanned the street nervously. They'll have officers here. Yeah, but not for long, Axel replied, prying open the panel. His fingers danced across wires with practiced ease. Sparks flew. The door slid open with a reluctant hiss. Inside waited his ship. She was sleek, dark, and predatory, the kind of vessel designed for speed and stealth rather than luxury. Her lines were sharp, her hull painted in matte black that swallowed the light. The Riff Raider, Axel said with obvious pride. Doesn't look like much, but she's got it where it counts. Mela's eyes widened. A Terran Shadowhawk. These were decommissioned decades ago. Which is why the Alliance doesn't expect her. Perks of flying a ghost. He pressed his palm to the scanner, and the boarding ramp lowered. After you. They hurried aboard. Mela slipped into the co-pilot seat as Axel dropped into the pilot's chair. The cockpit was a strange blend of modern and retro holographic readouts, alongside vintage switches and buttons, Earth band posters plastered across the walls. Strap in, he said, flipping a series of toggles. This is going to get bumpy. Engines roared to life. Outside shouts rose as officers flooded into the bay. Muzzle flashes lit the dark as disruptor fire ricocheted off the hull. Too late, boys, Axel muttered, slamming the thrusters. The Riff Raider blasted forward, smashing through the half-closed bay doors. Metal shrieked and sparks rained as they rocketed into the night sky. But freedom was short-lived. Cruiser at 3 o'clock, Mela warned, pointing through the viewport. A massive Alliance vessel loomed, its bulk bristling with weaponry. I see it, Axel growled, throwing the ship into a steep dive. Gravity pressed them back into their seats as the Raider plummeted toward the canyon-riddled surface. Disruptor fire lanced through the air, scorching past them. The cruiser's cannons boomed, shaking the night. Axel gritted his teeth, weaving between jagged rock spires. The ship groaned, warning lights flaring across the console. Mela clutched the harness, turquoise eyes wide. You call this flying? She shouted over the roar. Flying, Axel said with a cocky grin with style. They skimmed so low the Raider's belly nearly scraped the canyon floor. The cruiser tried to follow, but its massive bulk couldn't match the smaller ship's agility. Axel threaded through natural rock arches, spiraling through narrow ravines until the cruiser fell further and further behind. Finally, they burst free of the canyon into open sky. The cruiser loomed in the distance, but for the moment they were clear. Mela exhaled shakily. Terrifying, she admitted. Then after a pause, her lips curved into something between awe and exhilaration. But also invigorating. Axel shot her a sidelong glance. Told you, adrenaline works every time. She shook her head, silver hair cascading over her shoulders. No, it's more than adrenaline. It's freedom. Axel didn't answer. He didn't need to. The look in her eyes said everything. For the first time since she had fled her people, since she had defied the Alliance, Mela felt alive. And for the first time in years, Axel realized he wasn't just running from something, he was running toward something, though he couldn't yet name it. The stars stretched into lines, then snapped back into pinpricks of light as the Riff Raider emerged from hyperspace. For a moment, silence filled the cockpit. No alarms, no shouting officers, no thunder of cannons. Just the hum of the ship's engines and the quiet rhythm of two fugitives catching their breath. Ahead loomed what looked like nothing more than a barren asteroid belt. Gray rocks tumbled endlessly in the void, colliding occasionally in silent explosions of dust. To most scanners, it was just another unremarkable region of dead space. But Axel Kushner knew better. He angled the Raider toward a massive asteroid in the cluster. To Mela's eyes, it seemed identical to the others, lifeless and pocked with craters. Then as they drew closer, a seam appeared across its surface. With a low rumble, a section of rock slid open, revealing a concealed hangar bathed in warm golden light. Welcome to Harmony Point, Axel announced, guiding the ship inside. Mela's breath caught. The hangar alone was bustling with activity. Human and alien crews worked side by side, unloading cargo, welding hull plates, and ferrying containers. Crates stamped with Alliance insignias had been repurposed to store food, art supplies, or in some cases, musical instruments. The air vibrated faintly with overlapping rhythms from portable speakers scattered around the docking bay. Axel powered down the Raider, and the boarding ramp hissed open. Come on, he said, offering his hand. You'll want to see this. She followed him down the ramp, her boots clicking softly on the hangar deck. No one stared. No one raised a weapon. Instead, people of all species moved with purpose, united by something Mela couldn't yet name, but could feel pulsing in the air freedom. They wound through a series of carved tunnels. The walls bore marks of mining equipment long since abandoned, but now glowing crystals and jury-rigged lighting strips illuminated the way. As they walked, Axel explained, started as a mining colony. When the veins ran dry, the miners discovered the asteroid was mostly hollow. Perfect hideout. A few smugglers set up shop. Word spread. Now it's home to about 3,000 souls, all dedicated to one thing the Alliance hates most. And what is that, she asked softly. Expression, he said simply. The tunnel opened suddenly into a vast cavern, and Mela stopped short. It was a city carved into stone. Dwellings lined the walls in tiered layers, light spilling from windows. Hydroponic gardens glowed with green and blue bioluminescence feeding the colony. In the central plaza, dozens of species mingled freely, humans chatting with scaled reptilians, insectoid aliens playing card games with amphibians, children of different worlds chasing each other through the square. But what struck her most was the sound. Music, everywhere. Different styles, different instruments, some familiar, others utterly alien. It should have been chaos, a cacophony of competing rhythms, but somehow it worked. It was harmony, messy and alive. This, Mela struggled to find words. Her throat felt tight. It is beautiful. Axel smiled, clearly pleased with her reaction. Yeah, gets me every time. A booming laugh interrupted them. Kushner, you son of a gun. A mountain of a man strode toward them. Dark-skinned, head-shaved arms inked with intricate tattoos that seemed to shift under the cavern's light. His beard framed a grin wide enough to split stone. He engulfed Axel in a bear hug that lifted him off his feet. Thought the Alliance finally bagged you, the giant said, setting him down. Not yet. Hammer Axel chuckled. They're trying harder than usual, though. Hammer's gaze shifted to Mela. His eyebrows rose appreciatively. And who's this vision of starlight? Mela of Lesitha, she said, extending her hand the way Axel had shown her. Hammer surprised her by bowing over her fingers instead of shaking. Enchanted. Any friend of Kushner is welcome at the amplifier. The amplifier, best damn music venue in the outer systems, Axel explained. And the only place you can hear live rock without Alliance jackboots shutting it down. Hammer's grin widened. Speaking of which, you picked a hell of a night to show up. Stellar Scream's playing a new set. Place'll be packed. Mela tilted her head. Stellar? Screama. Only the best heavy metal band this side of Earth, Hammer said proudly. You're in for a treat. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted at the hangar entrance. A group of rough-looking individuals had entered, predominantly alien, with weapons slung casually at their sides and eyes scanning the crowd. Their predatory gaze locked briefly on Axel and Mela. Bounty hunters, Axel muttered, jaw tightening. Vex works fast. Mela whispered, her blood running cold. Hammer's smile vanished. Back room, he said quietly, gesturing toward a door behind the bar. Go, I'll stall them. They slipped away, ducking into a smaller chamber that served as both storage and Hammer's office. Axel immediately moved to a console, fingers flying across the keys. Checking the bounty network, he explained. A holographic notice flickered to life. Axel whistled low. 10 million credits, dead or alive. Mela's heart sank. The data crystal, she murmured, clutching the small device hidden in her outfit. It must be even more dangerous than I realized. Axel glanced up. Crystal. She hesitated, then pulled it out. The device gleamed faintly under the console's glow. What's on it, he asked. Evidence, she whispered, of what the core really does. Cultural erasure on a galactic scale. Not just banning human art, but rewriting the identities of entire species. Axel's expression hardened. That's why the music hit you so hard. You weren't just hearing it for the first time, you were remembering what your people once had. Her eyes glistened. Yes, according to the fragments I saw before I fled, my ancestors possessed a rich musical tradition. Complex harmonics tailored to our hearing. The Alliance didn't just ban it, they altered our genetic memory, making us recoil at certain frequencies. They made us afraid of our own voices. For a moment, silence reigned. Axel reached out, gently touching her shoulder. Humans have a saying, he said quietly. Music speaks to the soul. Do you believe that, she asked, her voice trembling. I believe some things transcend species language, even the Alliance's laws. Some connections are universal. Their eyes locked the air between them charged. Slowly, inevitably, Axel leaned closer. Their lips met. Tentative at first, then deeper, hungrier. For Mela, it was like the floodgates had opened, every suppressed emotion, every forbidden impulse, unleashed in a single kiss. For Axel, it was confirmation of something he'd felt building since the nightclub. The door burst open. Hammer stood there, face grim. Bounty hunters are gone for now, but they'll be back, and worse. Vex himself is on his way. Someone tipped him off. Axel swore under his breath. How long? Hours at most. But there's something else. Hammer's grin returned sly and dangerous. The band wants to help. They're planning to turn tonight's show into a diversion while you decode that crystal and broadcast its contents. Mela's eyes widen. A concert as cover for a data leak. Axel's tactical mind was already racing. It's perfect. The Alliance would never expect it. Hammer clapped his massive hands together. Then it settled. Tonight we rock the foundations of the Alliance. Mela tightened her grip on the crystal, her pulse quickening. For the first time since she'd fled, she felt not just like a fugitive, but like a warrior with a purpose. The amplifier had never felt so alive. By the time night fell across Harmony Point's hidden asteroid, the underground venue throbbed with anticipation. Word had spread that Stellar Scream was playing their new album a rarity, given the constant threat of Alliance raids. Hundreds became thousands, humans and aliens cramming into the cavernous hall carved from stone. Bright banners fluttered speakers, the size of shuttles lined the stage, and makeshift holographic lights painted the ceiling with streaks of fire and stars. Mela stood backstage clutching the data crystal like it was her lifeline. The roar of the crowd seeped through the walls, of physical vibrations she felt in her bones. She glanced at Axel, who adjusted the straps on his sidearm, before catching her gaze and flashing that maddeningly confident grin. "You sure about this?" she whispered. "Sure," he chuckled. "Hell no, but it's the best bad idea we've got." Hammer appeared, his massive arms crossed. "Phoenix says you'll have until the third song. That's when the crowd peaks. After that, you'll take the stage. The broadcast should ride the music out to every relay in the sector." Mela swallowed hard. "And if the Alliance intervenes, then we fight," Hammer said simply. His eyes softened briefly. "But trust me, girl, this crowd won't let them win easy." Phoenix himself strode up, then tall and wiry, with his flame-red mohawk catching the light. Tattoos swirled across his arms, and his grin was sharp as a blade. "You ready to make history, sweetheart?" Mela straightened. "History or die trying?" "That's the spirit," Phoenix laughed. "Now get that crystal talking. We'll handle the warm-up." The lights dimmed. The crowd roared. The first thunderous chords of Rebellion's roar shook the cavern, the drummer pounding like artillery fire. Phoenix leapt onto the stage, his voice a ragged snarl that somehow carried pure fire. "Harmony Point," he bellowed. "Are you ready to scream for freedom?" The answer was deafening. Backstage, Mela hunched over the decryption device, fingers trembling but precise. Layers of Alliance encryption peeled back one by one, each revealing darker truths, records of erased traditions, falsified histories, species genetically altered to suppress their own cultural instincts. Axel hovered nearby, scanning the crowd for threats. His hand brushed her shoulder, once grounding her. She didn't look up, but she felt it. The second song built the frenzy higher. Sweat dripped from the ceiling, and as thousands of beings jumped and shouted in unison, fists pumping. The amplifier felt like the beating heart of a galaxy on the edge of awakening. Finally, with a soft chime, the crystal unlocked fully. A flood of files appeared on the screen: documents, videos, schematics. Among them, one detail seared itself into Mela's mind. "They called it the Harmony Protocol," she whispered. "A multi-generational program. They rewrote our genes to make us recoil from certain frequencies. That's why I feared your music. It wasn't natural. It was programmed." Axel's jaw clenched. "Bastards." She looked up at him, eyes shimmering. "My people once had a vast musical heritage, complex harmonies beyond anything humans could imagine. The Alliance buried it, but I can feel it inside me like something waiting to be set free." Axel leaned closer, his voice fierce. "Then tonight you set it free." The third song began. Phoenix raised his fist. Harmony Point. We've got guests with a message the Alliance doesn't want you to hear. Spotlights flared, bathing Axel and Mela as they stepped onto the stage. The crowd erupted in cheers and whistles. For an instant, the sheer weight of thousands of eyes pressed down on Mela. But then she remembered the music, the liberation it had stirred in her soul, and her fear melted into determination. She connected the crystal to the band's modified transmitter. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then subtle waves began to ride beneath the guitars and drums, invisible frequencies carrying stolen truths. On the massive screens above the stage, images appeared Alliance documents, footage of cultural preservation squads burning instruments, erasing murals, silencing entire villages. The cheers turned to gasps, then to furious shouts. The crowd surged with anger voices rising against the lies they had lived under. And that was when the Alliance struck. Doors slammed open, armored officers stormed and disruptors raced pushing through the crowd. At their head marched Commander Vex Draylock, his ash-gray skin glistening under the lights, eyes as cold as carved ice. "Shut it down," he roared. The crowd didn't scatter. They surged forward instead, forming a barrier of flesh and fury. Officers tried to push through, but fists, claws, and tentacles fought back. Chaos erupted the cavern, a storm of bodies and sound. On stage, Axel drew his pistol, but Mela touched his arm. "No," she whispered. "Let me." She stepped forward, the microphone trembling in her hand. For a moment, she froze. The noise, the violence, the weight of centuries of silence pressed down. Then she closed her eyes, and she sang. Not words, not a melody she had ever learned, but something older, deeper, the Lycian chord, a harmonic progression that rose from her chest like lightning, splitting the air with resonance too complex for human notation. The crowd fell silent in awe. The very stone of the cavern vibrated. Instruments faltered as the band members stared, then seamlessly wove their music around her tones. Heavy metal guitars, screamed drums thundered, and Mela's harmonics soared above it all, creating something new, something transcendent. Alliance officers staggered, clutching their heads as their neural implants overloaded. Vex himself froze mid-step, his weapon clattering to the floor. His eyes widened, then filled with tears. "I remember," he whispered hoarsely, "before the academy, my people sang." Gasps rippled through the soldiers. Many of them were from cultures equally stripped of their identities. One by one, their weapons lowered as memory surged back. The crowd roared again, not in fear, but in defiance. 1,000 voices joined Mela's humming, shouting, singing. The cavern shook with collective catharsis. Axel stared at her, awe and pride mingling. She wasn't just an alien fugitive anymore. She was the spark of a revolution. Vex staggered closer, trembling. You can't. It's forbidden." Mela's voice cut through him like a blade. "No, it was stolen, and tonight it is returned." She unleashed the full force of the Lycian chord. Vex collapsed to his knees, hands clutching his skull, tears streaming freely. Around him, soldiers dropped their weapons, many joining the crowd's rebellion cry. On the screens above, the broadcast spread sector-wide. Dozens of worlds watched in real time as Harmony Point became the epicenter of cultural resurrection. Axel stepped to her side, wrapping an arm protectively around her as her body trembled from the strain of channeling such raw power. "You're not alone," he whispered fiercely. Together they stood as the cavern thundered with the sound of rebirth. The roar of rebellion carried on music once thought destroyed. The amplifier still trembled with echoes long after the last note had faded. The crowd hadn't dispersed. Instead, thousands lingered, voices raised in chants and songs, many improvising melodies that hadn't been heard in generations. Beings of different species held one another, some weeping openly, others laughing through their tears. The cavern that had once been a venue for contraband music now felt like a cathedral of freedom. Backstage, Mela sat slumped against a wall, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to catch her breath. Her throat felt raw, every nerve vibrating with aftershocks of the Lycian chord. Yet a profound calm rested over her, as if some invisible weight had finally lifted. Axel knelt beside her, one hand steadying her shoulder. "Hey," he said softly. There aren't words for what that was." She opened her eyes, slowly meeting his gaze. It was the truth. and the truth can't be silenced forever. Hammer burst into the room, then sweat streaming down his tattooed arms, his grin wider than ever. The broadcast worked, he boomed. Hammer's intel just confirmed it hit every relay in the sector. Entire worlds are seeing what the Alliance tried to bury. Axel looked up sharply, and the reaction. Hammer chuckled, though his eyes gleamed with something fiercer than humor. Rebellion, riots, celebrations. They're calling it the Harmony Revolution. From Proxima to Rho Cygni, people are rising. Mela pressed a trembling hand to her lips, her turquoise eyes filling. She hadn't dared to hope her voice could do more than free herself. But now entire civilizations were awakening. And Vex, Axel asked. Hammer's grin faltered. Locked in one of my storage rooms. He's not exactly the commander he was an hour ago. Keeps muttering about songs he remembers from childhood. Looks more broken than dangerous. Mela's expression softened. He wasn't our enemy, not truly. He was another victim of their erasure. Axel shrugged. Maybe, but don't expect me to invite him to karaoke. That earned a laugh from Mela, a small sound but genuine. Later that night, the two of them slipped away from the chaos of celebration to the Raiders' observation deck. The cavern's great hangar doors had opened, allowing them to see out into the starfield. Dozens of ships were already arriving, freighters, shuttles, even stolen patrol craft bearing refugees, rebels, and those eager to join the cause. Mela pressed her palms to the viewport, drinking in the sight. They're coming, she whispered. All of them, drawn here by hope. Axel stood behind her, arms folded, but his eyes never left her. And by you lit the spark. She turned, shaking her head. Not me. The music, your human music, gave me the courage to release what my people had lost. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. Music may have started it, but you carried it. You gave them something real to believe in. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of ships docking filled the silence. Then, almost without thinking, Axel reached out and cupped her cheek. She leaned into the touch, her eyes fluttering closed. When their lips met this time, it wasn't tentative. It was fierce, born of survival gratitude and the unspoken recognition that something had bound them together far deeper than chance. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Mela whispered, "When I first heard your heavy metal, I thought it would destroy me. Instead, it made me alive." Axel grinned crookedly. "Told you, it's raw, honest, primal, just like me." She swatted his chest lightly, but her smile lingered. By dawn, Harmony Point had transformed. What had been a secret outpost now thrummed with the energy of a movement. Messages poured in from across the sector, Alliance garrisons overwhelmed by sudden uprisings, cities filling with protesters singing newly remembered songs, artists painting forbidden murals on walls that had been blank for decades. One report made Mela's hands shake. Axel looked on Lasatha. He leaned over her shoulder to see the message: crowds of Lithians gathering in the plazas, humming harmonies their ancestors had sung before the erasure. Children were leading the songs, their voices pure and untrained, but resonant with something genetic that had finally reawakened. Mela covered her mouth, tears slipping down her cheeks. They're remembering. Axel slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. Looks like your people just needed the right key. Her voice broke, but she managed a smile. And you gave it to me. Not everyone celebrated. In the storage room where Vex was held, the once feared commander sat slumped, his hands shaking. His icy eyes had lost their edge, replaced by confusion and despair. I remember lullabies, he muttered when Axel and Mela visited. Voices in the dark, soft harmonies that soothed me as a child. They told us at the academy those were fabricated memories, but they weren't, were they? No, Mela said quietly. They were real, and they were stolen from you. Vex laughed bitterly, tears streaking his ash-gray cheeks. I devoted my life to enforcing silence, to erasing what I myself had lost. What irony. Axel folded his arms. So what now? You gonna help fix it or keep wallowing? The commander looked up at him, something flickering in his eyes. Perhaps redemption is still possible, but it will take more than one broken soldier. Mela's gaze softened. It will take all of us. That evening, as celebrations raged on, Axel and Mela returned once more to the observation deck. Ships continued to arrive. Some carried rebels, others refugees, still others smugglers willing to trade supplies for protection. Harmony Point was becoming more than a refuge. It was becoming the headquarters of a revolution. Axel wrapped his arms around Mela from behind, resting his chin lightly against her silver hair. So he murmured, "Where to now? We've got a galaxy full of newly awakened civilizations rediscovering their heritage. Could be a lot of concerts to attend." Mela turned in his arms, her turquoise eyes shining with a warmth that made his breath catch. "I was thinking we could start with Earth. I want to see where this music was born." He smiled, sealing the promise with a kiss. Earth it is. And as the Riff Raider prepared to carry them into the stars once more, Mela knew this was only the beginning. The Harmony Revolution had been lit, and there was no force in the galaxy strong enough to silence it. Harmony Point no longer felt like a hidden outpost. In the days following the concert, the asteroid had transformed into something far greater, the beating heart of a movement. Ships of every size poured in their hulls, scarred by battles or hastily repainted to hide stolen insignias. Refugees arrived carrying little more than memories they barely understood, while rebels brought weapons and determination. Miners, smugglers, artists, and scholars flooded the cavern city, each bringing something different, but united by a single truth: they would no longer be silent. The plaza echoed with the sounds of rebirth. Children sang their voices, lifting into harmonies their grandparents had been genetically programmed to forget. Painters covered the stone walls with murals, scenes of lost traditions, resurrected gods, and visions of freedom. Dancers moved in circles, their bodies rediscovering rhythms buried generations deep. It was chaos, messy, and loud, but it was alive. And the Alliance, for once, could do nothing to stop it. Mela stood on a balcony overlooking the plaza, her hands gripping the railing as she tried to absorb the enormity of what had begun. Every song, every brushstroke, every cheer felt like vindication, not just for herself, but for all the voices erased by the Cultural Preservation Corps. "You started this," a voice rumbled behind her. She turned to see Hammer, his massive frame leaning casually against the doorway. His tattoos glowed faintly in the light symbols of cultures that had refused to die. "No," Mela said softly. "The truth started this. I only gave it a voice." Hammer grinned. "Sometimes that's all it takes. One voice screaming into silence until others remember how to scream too." She smiled faintly, though her eyes remained troubled. "And the Alliance, they will not surrender so easily." No, Hammer agreed, but they've already lost. Once people taste freedom, you can't stuff it back in a cage. Later that night, the Riff Raiders' docking bay bustled with activity. Axel and Mela prepared for departure, the ship's systems humming with readiness. Phoenix approached a package tucked under one tattooed arm. "Before you go," he said, handing it to Mela, "a gift." She unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay a pair of sleek, custom-designed headphones, lightweight with adaptive resonance tuned precisely for Lycian auditory ranges. "They'll let you hear the full spectrum," Phoenix explained. "Every note, every frequency, no more holding back." Mela's breath caught. She slipped them over her ears experimentally, then looked up with a smile that glowed brighter than the hangar lights. "Thank you." Phoenix winked. "No thank you. What you did on that stage. It didn't just change this sector, it gave us a new anthem. You and Kushner here," he jabbed a thumb at Axel. "You're legends now." Axel snorted. "I've always preferred outlaw to legend." "Too late," Phoenix grinned. "You don't get to choose." Hammer appeared, then clapping Axel on the back so hard the smuggler nearly stumbled. "Take care of her, Kushner. She's worth more than any treasure you've smuggled in that rust bucket." Axel smirked, slipping an arm around Mela's waist. "Don't worry, she's the captain now." Mela rolled her eyes but didn't pull away. Inside the Riff Raider, the atmosphere was quieter. The chaos of Harmony Point faded as the ship powered up engines, thrumming with restrained energy. Axel guided her through the familiar hum of pre-flight checks. But tonight, something felt different. "Destination?" he asked, fingers poised over the nav controls. "Earth," Mela said firmly. "I want to see where your music was born." Axel grinned. "Earth it is." The Raider lifted smoothly, gliding out of the hangar into the starfield. Behind them, Harmony Point shrank to a speck of golden light among the asteroids, though its influence now stretched far beyond what the eye could see. As the ship accelerated, Mela settled into the co-pilot seat, slipping on her new headphones. Axel watched her expression as she scrolled through his collection. She started with Bach, the gentle architecture of the music unfolding across her face in wonder. "This is so different," she murmured. "Precise, mathematical, yet still filled with emotion." That's classical for you, Axel said, leaning back. Every note in its place, but still capable of breaking your heart. She cycled to jazz, her eyes widening at the unpredictable rhythms. It feels alive, as if it's improvising, adapting in real time. Exactly, it's freedom in sound. She kept listening, folk, blues, electronic. Each genre left her awestruck, each unlocking new sensations. Finally, she paused on a heavy metal track. The opening riffs filled her ears, and she smiled, closing her eyes as her body swayed. This one, she whispered, this feels like home now. Axel's chest tightened. Watching her like that, so free, so alive, was more intoxicating than any adrenaline rush. Hours later, as the Raider cruised on autopilot, Axel found Mela standing at the viewport, staring into the swirling void. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, leaning against the frame. She tilted her head. "A penny, old Earth saying, means what's on your mind." She smiled faintly. "I was thinking how strange it is. Something I feared would hurt me. Your music became the key to my freedom, and to the freedom of countless others." Axel stepped closer. "That's the thing about music. It doesn't just express emotions, it creates them. Doesn't just tell stories, it writes new ones." Her eyes shimmered as she met his gaze. "And ours." He slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Ours is just getting started." Their lips met again, this time slow and lingering, not born of desperation but of promise. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, a canvas awaiting the next verse of their song. Somewhere in the ship's speakers, as if on cue, the opening riff of another heavy metal anthem began to play, loud, defiant, alive. Mila laughed against his lips. A fitting soundtrack. "Damn right," Axel murmured. And as the Riff Raider cut through the void toward Earth, toward new stories and new rebellions, the Harmony Revolution echoed across the galaxy, born not of weapons, but of music, love, and the one thing no empire could ever erase: the unbreakable will to be free.